Thank you for joining IAB There.
Hi, this is Brad Behrens, IAB's editor-in-chief. On today's show, we bring you an interview from the Policy Day at our recent Brand Disruption Summit. IAB's Executive Vice President of Policy, Dave Grimaldi, interviews Alastair Mactaggart, one of the driving forces behind California's new CPRA, or the California Privacy Rights Act. Enjoy the interview and stick around after for information about IAB's next big event, the annual leadership meeting.
And while the thoughts and the opinions today of a regulator and a legislator and a national anchor were valuable, and while Congress and the FCC and the FTC can certainly alter the future of our industry and hold us accountable, the biggest impact on the data economy came from the motivation and the tenacity of our next guest. And again, we will hopefully in the short time we have him just learn a whole lot of the origins, where things are going, and the reaction that he's seen. They will all be valuable. Alastair Mactaggart and his stewardship of the California Consumer Privacy Act has, put simply, as an alumnus of many congressional offices, stepped in where Congress has stepped out. In the aftermath of the 2016 election, the hysteria around the use of online consumer data was running high, and Alastair entered our world separate and apart from Russian interference and Cambridge Analytica and antitrust fears. He launched his ballot initiative in the name of transparency and control and choice, all bedrock principles that IAB strives to improve. CCPA highlighted the sentiments of Californians and Americans around the need for safety and protection with regard to their online data. And Alastair forced our industry to stand up and listen and to realize that we and all that we do to provide free and ad-supported content and services, we're not free from scrutiny and oversight and truly the will of the people, which is what we saw. So there's really no other individual in technology today who has made our industry take as hard a look at ourselves, Alastair, as you have, and how our companies use consumer data. So welcome. And when you initially embarked on the CCPA ballot initiative 3 years ago, did you contemplate the soul searching that our industry would undergo and the change that would result? I think that even the origin story of CCPA is fascinating, but has our industry moved in the way that you thought it would? Have we resisted to a degree that you thought we would or didn't? Welcome, Alastair. Thank you for joining us.
Great, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. I think at one level, yes, I hoped that there would be change, and that's kind of what I got into it for. I think at another level, it was hard to predict the exact steps or path it would follow. I think, I'm a real estate developer, and so I'm used to chasing dead ends because you do a lot of that. You end up, looking at a lot of deals before you actually do one. And so when I first had the idea in 2015, I actually expected to find a reason why this wasn't going to work. And I kept on uncovering, turning over rocks, expecting to find out why it wasn't actually going to work. And so, you do the polling, and then it turns out everybody really cares about this. And you do the focus groups, and no, actually, people really want to do something. They don't know what to do. So then we did the research, and then there were all these moments where it could have, and I kind of half expected it to come off the rails. So, a good example of that is when we received our first title and summary from the Attorney General. I had always said to my little team, look, we have to write this thing so simply that the AG has no choice but to give us a title and summary that everybody will vote on, no matter how much is spent against it. There was a human trafficking initiative in 2012 that got like 80%. It's sort of like, who's against that, right? And so I kind of wanted it to be that, and we did actually get that because that's what the initiative said. So the path has been circuitous, but the destination kind of was what I hoped to do, to spend this time and money to do this. And so here's where we are. And so yeah, I'm pleased with where we got.
And granted, we're not ecstatic about what CCPA has forced, which is the wrong verb. Let's go with prompted our industry to do, but we're learning from this journey. And it's caused us to view Washington legislators in a different light. state assemblies, public interest groups and consumer groups to hear them out more, to see where the winds are blowing. On kind of dovetailing to what you just said, is it too early to tell if there is noticeable change all the way down to the consumer and the user experience? My sense is now that CPRA has been enacted, it could be 6 months, it could be a year or so since enforcement began, and now we have a whole nother regime to kind of fulfill that vision.
My sense is implementation. Rome wasn't built in a day. This is CCPA was a sea change. CPRA is going to take it further. GDPR was a sea change. The technology didn't exist for consumers. And then all of a sudden you have the smartphone. We're all carrying these things around. The amount of data we're generating is extraordinary. And so regulation comes a little later, which it probably should. You don't want it to stifle innovation. But I think that it depends on the company. Microsoft and Apple were some of the first big companies to extend CCPA nationally. And so I think they really have the spirit of the thing. They've embraced that. Other companies, you can't find the do not sell button. Or if you do find it, you stare at it and you think, which way am I supposed to toggle this? It's that you can tell the language is intentionally trying to obfuscate. So I think it's early days, but I also think that privacy legislation is here to stay, because no matter what industry you are in, we're all just people and we're all consumers, and we have children and partners. And, for all of us, the technology, if we stop and think about it, there are parts of it that is totally fine, and then parts of it that is super creepy. And so I think we all realize, hey, we need to do something to get a handle on the super creepy parts of it. So I think it's early days, but it's a work in progress. And over time, it's going to get better.
That part of your motivation was hearing just in a casual setting how much data on you or an everyday American is within many companies that use data to monetize, et cetera. Certainly many IAB companies. You mentioned the word creepy. Can you talk for a minute about contextual and behavioral advertising? The latter enables our companies to build profiles on individuals to target goods and services to them. But behavioral ads have many critics. And my sense is that was part of the motivation and what you heard in that now memorable conversation that kind of spurred CCPA into creation.
Yeah, I think all of us, it's a continuum like so many things in life, right? And for all of us, the notion that you're going to search for a pickup truck and you're going to see a Ford dealer's ad, or you're going to read an article about New Zealand, you see something for Air New Zealand, that can be done in a very pro-privacy way. It's not invasive, and it's and I'm I think all of us who are thoughtful about this realize that that's very necessary in the internet. You need to pay for the internet somehow, so the advertising does. Now contrast that with a woman's trying to get pregnant, so she installs a pregnancy app and she's putting in some of her most intimate data, right? Does she have any expectation that's being sold and used to market to her? She'd be horrified. That's the kind of thing where I think all of us are sort of shake your head and say, yeah, that's not good. And so, my thought is that you're trying to, and I do think over time, and I don't know if anybody, I'm sure everybody did read, Gilad Edelman wrote an article in Wired a couple of months ago about the Dutch broadcaster NPO that finally decided just to get rid of the behavioral advertising and go with contextual advertising, and their revenue actually went up. And I've had tons of conversations with startups here in California post CCPA starting up, because I think we've now just created a privacy industry. And there's this renewed interest now in not just contextual advertising, but getting deeply granular about what the person is viewing or searching for. So if someone's reading this, that means they have a college education, or that means they were probably a man or probably a woman, or they have these interests. And then so you can get very you can kind of turbocharge the old contextual advertising, but again in a privacy protective way. So I tend to think that that's where we're headed. But again, it's choice, because some consumers if they don't care and they don't want to, they don't mind, or they like the behavioral advertising, again, CCPA and CPRA are all about consumer choice, but also giving you the tools to be able to stop this really invasive behavioral advertising, which, there was the Copley advertising settlement in Massachusetts in 2017. And while it was more geo-tracking as opposed to behavioral advertising, the notion again that a woman would walk into a reproductive health center at one of her most vulnerable times in her life, and would be looking at her phone, and all of a sudden all this live chat offers would pop up from right to life places. That's a hard one for me to swallow and say that those sorts of practices should be defended. Of course they shouldn't be. So I think CPRA will really give consumers the ability to say, you know what, stop tracking me 24/7 across in all these contexts where I don't expect to be tracked.
Right. And Alastair, though, is there then a sensible way, or you can lend some advice here to balance the need for transparency and informed consent with the reality of our data connected existence that just grows by the day? How we get asked this by members of Congress on the House and Senate Commerce Committees: how can consumers consent to every data interaction that they encounter? It seems untenable, but is consent the only way to assure privacy and security? And how is that, how does the value exchange that offers ad-supported content and services, how does that factor in terms of that user experience? A bit on that, if you could, because that's where that's kind of where we're trying to monetize, build business models, et cetera, is that need for transparency and informed consent, and consumers just having to do that every third click of the mouse. Right. Is there a circle to square there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think this is one of the areas that, say, for example, GDPR has to improve. One of the things I'm excited about, the ultimate vision of CCPA and then now CPRA, is that unlike GDPR, we allow for a third party to intercede for you, for you to essentially retain someone to act on your behalf. Mm-hmm. So that could be your browser. It could be a global opt-out on your phone. It could be an app. One of the things that's really interesting is I think that over time, we will have these trusted intermediaries that may manage it for me so I don't have to think about it. And, you can think about a whole bunch of things. You might not care, Dave, who's following you between 2 and 4 every day because you're in the office, but, it's more sensitive when you leave the office, or, so you might have gradations. And I think that, as I say earlier, we just created a privacy industry in California, which is going to help consumers manage this. It can't be up to me at every single website to find that do not sell button, to click on it, that's just not going to work. I think long term, and that's why we created this framework in both the laws, where you have this ability for the third party. The other thing which is interesting about the new law is it also has that second option where, if the business doesn't want to have the do not sell button, and they respect the consumer who shows up at the do not sell signal without any pop-up, without any, changing the terms of service or changing the quality of service, then they don't have, that's the kind of carrot and stick approach. So I would like to see, eventually in a world where you don't have all this kind of these pop-ups, because you get the click fatigue and people just consent because they want to get to the site, and it sort of, it's not ideal. So I think CPRA takes giant steps towards incenting businesses to get rid of that in return for not having the do not sell button.
It passed, Prop 24 passed with not the hugest margin, and there wasn't a public campaign against it. We heard a lot of murmurs that one could be stood up and funded, but one wasn't. How do you read that result? Is it and then the big question, I think, is is there more to come? Are you going to keep the ball? Are you going to keep running with it, or have you kind of turned this over to the world and the nation for follow what we did, Congress, take what you want, couple questions in there, so forgive me, but
Sure.
the aftermath of CPRA now.
Yeah, what I would say is, first of all, I think we're closing in on 2 million votes more than the no side. So I think if you look around the country, any margin of 2 million votes is not a trivial margin. So I'm feeling pretty good about where we are in terms of the margin of victory. The second thing, I think we spent basically no money on our side, right? So Uber and Lyft spent 220 million, and they get to 58%. We spent almost nothing and got to 56 over 56%. So I don't think it's fair to say there wasn't an opposition. Actually, I didn't expect where it came from, right? But you're all aware that the ACLU kind of went crazy on us, and I think those the notion that it's going to be the folks who want prioritizing a sort of a much more aggressive private right of action, that they want to make sure that no one can ever monetize their data. So they did have an impact, but luckily, again, I think privacy is so deeply popular that we were fine. And so I think, and in terms of where we go from here, I think we now have a good framework in place where in California, we have an ability we sort of have a baseline. I think everybody can bank, if you're a consumer, on the fact that it's going to be very hard to amend this law in a way that hurts consumer privacy. All you need is a simple majority in the legislature to amend it for any other reason, but you can't amend it in a way that hurts consumer privacy. That, I think, gives everybody actually business certainty that this law is going to be around. So 1 in 8 Americans are covered by this law. I think that's a good thing for business, because I think business likes certainty.
If a Biden administration leans into these issues, we've been talking about this all day, and a national conversation gets started, do you think that the politics around preemption and a private right of action will bog it down every time? Or are you rooting for Congress to pass a super strong CCPA-like national privacy law? Do you think that'll happen, that they'll get their ducks in a row? Clearly, as I said when we began, you weren't going to wait. Do you give it any hope? What do you think will happen?
Well, look, I mean, they can't agree what day it is. So it's not, yes, of course they can get something done. I'm not holding my breath. As an American, I think it would be great if Americans had great privacy legislation. I do think that now that CPRA is passed, America will, and it'll come one of two ways. Either Congress will get something done, or other states will look at California, and either consumers will say to their legislatures, hey, give us something like that. Or frankly, if we get adequacy here in California, I think other states will say, well, we can't possibly let California take that, be the only state that's been given adequacy. I think if you look at Congress, I think we all know, right? So as of the recent election, California Democrats are 21% of the House Democratic caucus. We got the speaker, we have 4 committee chairs, we've got, I think, 22 subcommittee chairs. So, this is a powerful body.
And a vice president down the road.
And so then you say, okay, we're gonna have 9 million people voted for this in your state. Is it likely that California says, sure, that just happened, but go ahead and preempt us? I just don't know that that's a likely outcome. Then you say, okay, well, we're going to have a law that's as strong, or as California. Well, that would involve the private right of action around the negligent data breach, which, if the Republicans retain control of the Senate, it could happen. But I think these are harder hills to climb. But again, as an American, I would welcome good privacy for the country. I do think, if you think about data breach, the model's already there, where California adopted data breach and Congress didn't act, and the other states adopted it. And so, and we have the model with air quality, right? So California, the Air Resources Board really sets the standard for the country. So that could be the situation here.
Understood. Alastair, one more question, based on kind of where you just went. The new California Privacy Protection Agency, what type of individuals do you expect to be on it? Types of backgrounds, et cetera. And then how soon do you think that'll start moving?
My crystal ball is not better than anybody else's about how soon. The statute says within 90 days of the election being certified. So figure that takes a month, early November, early December. So sometime in, between then and February. In terms of individuals, what we put in the measure was people with expertise in privacy and consumer, affairs. And so I would hope we get good people. I would hope we don't get, rock thrower kind of people who want to just make a name for themselves. You hope you get people who are committed to the cause and want to have good, effective privacy regulations that protect California consumers.
Right. Alastair, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. This is I hope it's many more conversations to come, the insights and the lessons learned. We could just keep going on and on, but Alastair, thank you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for listening to Dave Grimaldi's interview with Alastair Mactaggart. IAB's next big event is ALM, the annual leadership meeting running the week of March 8th. To find out more, visit www.iab.com